Va fi un război mai mare în Orientul Mijlociu sau liderii din regiune or să ajungă la concluzia că au fost suficiente conflicte între țările lor și vor alege pacea? La nivelul Națiunilor Unite sunt deja votate rezoluții care ar putea rezolva cea mai mare parte a problemelor din zonă, dar, cel puțin acum, nu le respectă nimeni. Mai mult, acordul nuclear iranian, poate cea mai complexă înțelegere pentru întregul Orient Mijlociu, a fost anulat. Seyer Hossein Mousavian predă la Universitatea Princeton din Statele Unite cursuri despre Orientul Mijlociu și politicile nucleare. Este invitatul meu de astăzi. Sunt Cristina Cileacu, începe Pașaport diplomatic. Seyer Hossein Mousavian, former senior negotiator for the nuclear Iran deal. Welcome to Diplomatic Passport.
Thank you very much.
We are talking about the situation in the Middle East because it's getting complicated by day or by hour. What do you think, in your view, being Iranian, is this the cause of these complications added each day?
I believe the first important reason and cause is the United Nations weakness. I mean, the UN Security Council, which is the highest body internationally to maintain peace, security and stability in the Middle East, they have been extremely weak and irrelevant to resolve the wars and crises during past decades. From Iraqi invasion of Iran to Iraqi invasion of Kuwait to US war on Iraq to US war on Afghanistan, Saudi-US war on Yemen, NATO war on Libya, the UN and the United Nations Security Council role has been zero. Other than some maybe resolutions and statements, nothing. Therefore, when the highest level responsible for international peace and security is irrelevant to resolve the major crisis in the Middle East, then the second option would be whether the international powers, the world powers, would have any cooperation, dialogue to cooperate to resolve these crises. Unfortunately, you cannot see, and we have not been able to see in past decades, the world powers, they have been able to have cooperation to resolve these crises. And I'm sorry to say, part of the major problems in the Middle East is because of the rivalry between the superpowers. And some of the major problems in the Middle East, the source of the problem are those superpowers, whether Soviet Union invasion of Afghanistan or the US invasion of Iraq or Afghanistan, you know. And the third problem is, again, unfortunately, there is no serious dialogue, cooperation between the regional powers. I mean, you can see the Middle East today is at the verge of collapse. And the regional powers, whether this is Saudi Arabia or Turkey or Iran or Egypt or what, they are not negotiating, they don't have a dialogue to see whether there could be a regional solution, how they can contribute every major regional power to resolve a crisis. And I'm again sorry to say that part of the problems of the region is because of the rivalries and the race between the regional powers, whether this is Iran or Israel, Iran or Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Saudi Arabia, you know, I mean, Egypt or Saudi Arabia.
Cross interests, cross...
That's why the lack of the UN security role, the world powers role, the regional powers role in the Middle East has left this region with destruction.
So in this case, you explained very well, all these rivalries are quite true. It's obvious for everyone. It's easy to notice them if you look closely. But in this case, when the dialogue is rather formal and not practical, not giving any solution, will it be a bigger war in the Middle East?
No, I think with the current situation, if the current trend and the past trend is going to continue, I believe the Middle East would totally collapse. And we would have not only some failed states like Libya, like Afghanistan, I don't know, you have like Syria or so, we would have a failed region. And the consequences would be disaster on extremism, on energy, on terrorism, you know, for Europe, for US, for the world powers, for Asia. However, if we are thinking about a long-term sustainable solution for this region, one big part is about peace process, about Palestinian-Israeli crisis. I think this is the mother of the crisis. And it's about 80 years. We have something about 400 United Nations resolutions on Israeli-Palestinian issue. Many of those resolutions have clearly stated two-state solution. Many of those resolutions have insisted on the obligation of Israel to withdraw the occupied land from 1967. And it has totally failed. Despite of 8 years, despite of about 400 resolutions, Israel is insisting on one-state solution, a Jewish state. There are some other ideas in the Middle East, like even Iran, that they are insisting on one-state Palestine. I believe, frankly speaking, to be realistic, not idealistic, neither would work. We need to implement, to respect the UN resolutions. And without a two-state solution, there would be never a solution for Palestinian-Israeli crisis. And the second issue is about Persian Arabs. It is not only really the tension after revolution, even before revolution. It needs some step-by-step solutions, because we don't have any international rules, regulations, resolutions how to resolve the rivalries or hostilities or problems or tensions between Persians and Arabs. I believe the first and the most important step would be a dialogue, a forum of dialogue between Iran, GCC, which is led practically by Saudi Arabia and Iraq, 8 countries around the Persian Gulf, to have a new security and cooperation structure in the Persian Gulf, a type of OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, a type of cooperation like European Union. If we can have a regional cooperation system in the Persian Gulf to end the rivalries between Iran and Saudi Arabia, Iran and GCC, or rivalries between Iraq and GCC, because Iraq and GCC also, they have a history of conflicts and wars. And even the conflict within GCC, we have not forgotten the problem between Saudi Arabia and Qatar, Emirates and Qatar. They were going to bring regime change in Qatar. You know, I mean, it is not only about Persian and Arabs. It is not about Iraq and GCC, even within the GCC. That's why I believe such a regional cooperation system would contribute enormously to the stability of energy and security of energy, since the Persian Gulf is one of the major sources of export of energy. Second, this would have a positive impact on the crisis in Syria, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Libya, because everywhere you go, either Saudi Arabia or Emirates or Qatar or Iran, or they are involved in this crisis. And then you would need a broader peace and security structure for the whole Middle East. I mean, the third step should start from a type of nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East, because Israel is the only country in the Middle East which has 90 to 400 nuclear bombs. Now Iran has become a nuclear threshold state. Saudi Arabia now is planning to have a full-scale nuclear program. And when Saudis, they have enrichment, Turkey would go for it. Emirates would go for it. Egypt would go for it.
And the complications will grow and grow and grow.
Would grow and grow and grow.
But this idea sounds a little idealistic, I should say, because as you explained, all the actors in the area are meddling with others' issues, supporting some, not supporting others, fighting against each other, not agreeing to each other, and so on and so forth. So how can such an idea that bottom line is good for all be able to have some sort of implementation?
I understand what you say, and many people are thinking there is no hope, there is no solution.
Hope. No, there's always hope. We should keep this...
But if you're going to have any solution for any crisis, this should be based on international norms and regulations. The first issue I mentioned about two-state solution, it really depends to the political willing of the world powers, and the most important is United States, because the US is the only country, I believe, can bring a two-state solution and can force Israel. They say we cannot force Israel, but we have 1 year war, Israeli war on Gaza, Israeli war on Lebanon, and Israeli generals, they publicly say, without the US weapons, we cannot continue the war for 1 day. Therefore, if Americans, they decide, they can stop it tomorrow. Just if they decide to stop the flow of weapons.
America will never abandon Israel.
But if there is going to be any solution, we need to invest on the international rules and regulations. And we have UN resolutions on two-state solution. This is one. Second, when I said about nuclear weapon-free zone, we have UN resolutions. And you have the Iranian nuclear deal, because the Iranian nuclear deal, believe it or not, it is not only about Iran.
Of course.
The Iranian nuclear agreement, called JCPOA, is the most comprehensive agreement during the history of non-proliferation, 170 pages, far beyond NPT.
And 13 years of negotiations.
13 years. And more than 200 nuclear scientists, not only politicians. They have created the most comprehensive framework for non-proliferation. And if there would be a political will to revive it, and then to regionalize the principles of JCPOA. I mean, all countries in the Middle East go for the same principles. Then you can imagine this would be a big step toward nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East. Then we are talking about Iran, GCC and Iraq dialogue for a Persian security structure, cooperation structure in the Persian Gulf. You have Resolution 598, which it has invited or given mandate to Secretary General to start negotiations with 8 countries around the Persian Gulf for a new security and cooperation structure. I mean, if we say the United Nations Security Council and the UN resolutions are irrelevant, then there is no hope, not only for peace in the Middle East,
All of the world.
all of the world.
În emisiunea Antreprenorești adoptă un sat, vă arătăm cum satul românesc se transformă în bine prin inițiative care fac diferența.
Am dezvoltat o aplicație de telemedicină și poți intra în legătură cu un medic în 20 de secunde.
Prin aceste impulsuri se grăbește procesul de vindecare și de stimulare a regenerării zonale.
Pe perioada internarii ne dădeam seama că de fapt ei veneau că nu mai reușeau să fie atenți la școală sau aveau altfel de probleme și de fapt în spate era consumul de droguri.
Din 2008 și până astăzi am implementat aici 6 proiecte, finanțare nerambursabilă, prin care împreună toate au făcut ceea ce este astăzi.
Emisiune oferită de Dedeman și de LACO.
But who has this type of influence? Yes, United States is the world superpower, but from your view now, you are an Iranian living in the United States, so you know very well the Middle East, but also you know from inside the United States. Does it look like United States still can impose? Do they have influence still in the Middle East?
The U.S. role and influence and hegemony in the Middle East has decreased, no doubt about it. Americans, they have been dominating the Middle East for 60, 70 years. And today China is economic number 1 of Middle Eastern countries. This is because of the U.S. mistakes. In August 2023, I was invited by a United States Strategic Command. 750 top American generals, they participated, and I was one of the keynote speakers. I told them your mistake is during last 60, 70 years have created disaster situation in the Middle East, from war on Iraq to Afghanistan and warmongering policies. You have been involved in regime changes in many countries. It is not only about Iran, about Syria, in Libya, you know. And your principles on democracy and human rights has been just fake principles, because always you have had double standards. If any country has been your allies, you have forgotten everything about human rights and democracy. If a country has been in hostility with you, not in your court, then you have invested on democracy and human rights. Therefore, you have double standards. But if you look at China, China has not been involved in wars in the Middle East. China has not been involved in regime changes. China has not have a double standards, claiming on democracy something and...
No, China only wants business. It's a different approach.
It is not only business. Don't make a mistake. Chinese have a principle, good relation with all countries.
We saw this type of bringing together at the same table people that didn't get along, also in history, invited in the United States. And then again we saw wars, or we saw a short peace that end up in almost nothing, if not another war. So, okay, we had now the Chinese model.
we can accept that it's working, but we started our discussion talking about the irrelevance of the United Nations. If it's China, if it's United States, this type of relations, as I said, work for a while, or perhaps a longer time, we will never know. Without anything bigger than just China or just United States.
If you think big, then you need to go for big. And this is not going to happen without the political will of the 5 permanent members of United Nations Security Council, which they are legally, internationally responsible for peace, security in the world. And then if you are going to go for big, already you have resolutions. Two-state solution is a big deal. Nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East is a big deal. Middle East free from all weapons of mass destruction, WMD free zone in the Middle East is a big deal. You have on all each big deals, you have UN resolutions. But if you tell me neither the regional powers have the political will to engage, nor the world powers sitting at United Nations Security Council have the political will to engage, to implement, to execute the UN resolutions, I would say yes, there would be no solution. Then there is no solution.
Mr. Mousavian, thank you so much for this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Cristina.
Atât pentru astăzi, dar rămânem în continuare online pe pagina de Facebook a emisiunii și pe contul nostru de X. Revenim cu subiecte noi din lumea diplomației și a politicii externe, vinerea viitoare de la 11:30 și reluare sâmbătă după miezul nopții. La revedere!